Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Casey, and welcome to the official return of Nerdist News Talks Back. It's our weekly panel discussions, a down and dirty, over-the-top cage match of a talk show about all things pop culture. And to quote the Greek philosopher Socrates, we're back, baby. Now, on today's show, we're going to be talking about a wide variety of things, starting off with J.K. Simmons' bright future in the MCU. And then we have a description of time inversion in Tenet. Does it make sense? And do you remember Animorphs? No, that wasn't a fever dream. Of course you remember. And then we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to be talking about the problems faced by local comic book shops in the era of COVID-19. And folks, in honor of it being the 19-year anniversary of the Fast and Furious arriving in theaters, we thought we'd test our panel's knowledge with some Fast franchise trivia. So all of this and more on today's Nerdist News Talks Back. We're so glad you're going to join us today. We have a lot to discuss, but before we dive into the hottest topics of the week, let's say hello to our panel. Joining us from the El Rey Network and host of Nerdist Book Club, it's Hector Navarro.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. Next up, she's a writer for Honest Trailers and from Sci-Fi's The Great Debate, Danielle Radford.
Hi, I'm here. Thank you for having me. This is really great. I'm so excited.
I'm so happy you're here too. I didn't recognize you outside of your robot form.
Beep, boop, bop, boop, beep.
Oh, that's what I recall. And last but not least, she's Nerdist contributing editor, a certified Doctor Who mega fan, and the person I'm going to for advice in the zombie apocalypse. Please welcome Ty Gooden.
Hello. So glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us, Ty. Now, folks, before we get started, I have to say it was just announced earlier today that Joel Schumacher, the director behind incredible films like Batman Forever, The Lost Boys, Flatliners, and St. Elmo's Fire, has sadly passed away at the age of 80. Now, obviously, his films and career had a major impact on all of us here. We want to take the time to look back on his life and his filmography. So I'm going to put this to the panel. Which of his films do you remember the most, and what kind of impact did they have on you?
I mean, I would be lying if I said that I don't remember his Batman films the most. Obviously,
Yeah.
You know, being a nerd, we grew up with that stuff in the 90s. And what's really interesting about Joel Schumacher is that he's a great example of fandom sort of coming around and realizing their mistake or being too harsh. And I saw that in real time. When we were young, they were films that were not critically super well received, and even Batman fans and comic book fans themselves really came down hard on them. Years and years later, people would go back and say, you know what, we can't just judge this amazing man's career based on these two movies that were made with studio input. And, you know, he thought he was making a big toy commercial, and it was camp and it was purposeful. And I think fans realized a lot of what he was trying to do with those films. And more importantly, realized that, yeah, these were two movies that he made, but did by no means define his career. I remember the first time I saw Falling Down, I was really blown away. I was really impressed. I remember seeing so many of other films that Schumacher had directed and just being like, yeah, this is crazy. This is the same guy that did Batman and Robin and Batman Forever, very fun, camp, you know, corny movies. And he was a really, really talented director. So that's what I think is really cool about looking back at his career, is that it is so varied and so interesting.
Yeah, he was given an impossible task. Like, for those of us, I am a huge Batman Returns fan. That is my Batman. I love it. But essentially, what it wound up being is a vehicle for Catwoman and Penguin. In fact, Batman has not a lot of, if you look back, even Michael Keaton insisted that Batman not have a lot of screen time in that. And he has the fewest amount of screen time he's ever had in any Batman movie. And if you look at the number, it's shockingly low. I used to know it off the top of my head. I don't have it right now. But so that movie was so dark and sexy that places like these big brands, McDonald's, other brands were like, we need to do a 180 because we couldn't market the sexy Catwoman, penguin who bites people's noses and they bleed movie. Like, that's not for kids. And so Joel Schumacher was given the task of being able to bridge what happened before, along with making it with something that was very brand safe. And this was, and we've talked about this with the Batman series. I think like most of us in fandom, this was the first time, or one of the first times, when it was really like, it's not just about the character, even as a superhero, because obviously this was one of the biggest superhero series. It's about the marketing. It's about, because they spend so much money. It's about getting that back. It's about the bat symbol and the fact that they had to change it so that they could make sure they could copyright it. So it wound up becoming the oval that we know instead of what it wound up being earlier. they wound up having to do that so they could copyright the t-shirts. So branding and marketing and making money was a very big part of this for the studio. And for Joel Schumacher to be told, well, we want you to come in and still feel like the other films, but do it in a way that doesn't make dads uncomfy. Um, and he still tried to put in what he could. He still tried to put in lady agency and lady sexuality. Not always at his best, but again, we don't know what was him and what was shoehorned in from the studio. And I think that these films get very badly maligned. I've talked at length about Batman Forever and how I think that it is very unfairly um, talked about as this failure of a film when there are a lot of really good things about it in terms of characterization. And this isn't even getting into the soundtrack, which I'm sorry is one of the most iconic film soundtracks ever made, especially for something of that size. Um, it's something I've talked about, but it is impossible, the idea that you would be able to come in and both say, well, I want to take these things that people clearly liked and make them work. And then also, I have to make sure that there are toys to sell because that's the job I was given. And I think a lot of the mistakes that were made in those final two films were not his mistakes. I think that they were marketing and branding mistakes. But he's the one who gets the blame for it. And it's not fair.
Well, for me, like switching gears away from Batman and going towards horror as a horror fan, I really love The Lost Boys. For me, it was one of the first vampire films I had seen where they really changed the way that you thought about vampires. Like they were cool. They were, it had a campy feel to it. They got to be sexy. There was like really great humor. A different brand of humor, but something that I really latched on to when I first watched those movies. And so I love everything about The Lost Boys. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I love, everything they built with Santa Carla, and I'm so excited about it coming back, through a TV show. I'm just wondering if they're going to be able to capture that same spirit that, that Schumacher really put into the movie.
As long as they bring back the saxophone player, I am all for it.
Everybody loves the sax guy. He's, oiled up.
Exactly.
So sexy.
The
So sexy.
most vampire movies are missing. But Joel Schumacher, that was the kind of guy he was, a guy with a great eye for striking visuals, and may he rest in peace. Yeah. Now, Danielle, you mentioned Batman Returns, and it's funny you mentioned that because guess who's back in the news? That's right, Michael Keaton. He's in talks to reprise his role as the Batman himself in the Flash movie for the DC Extended Universe. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. Does anyone have anything to say about it?
He's referring to the fact that before we started shooting, me and Hector literally were like biting our tongues to not do our perspective on this. Hector, please start. I need to know everything. You are our DC boy, and I want to know exactly how you feel.
I have a lot of thoughts inside. I love Michael Keaton, and I loved him in the role of Bruce Wayne 20, 30 years ago, 30 years ago now, going on 89. I love him, and I think he's fantastic. I also think that doing something like this is something that I've always wanted Warner Brothers making DC like centered movies to do, which is to go back to their history and recall some of that history. Like I love the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy, and I think that approach, which is very serious, worked. But I also remember watching that movie and going, man, I would have loved it if Adam West was the mayor of Gotham. Those kinds of things where it's like respecting the legacy and respecting the history in certain little sort of Easter egg type ways. Having said that, the thing that's really interesting about this, the rumors that we're seeing, and it was Hollywood Reporter that was kind of breaking it and talking about potentially what could happen, is that maybe it's more than a pop over into another alternate universe, which is something that The Flash does. We become accustomed to it with movies like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and that we have to mention that the CW folks, the DC TV series people, they were the ones to initiate this idea. They did it with Ezra Miller and Grant Gustin in the crossover last year. They were really the first people to look at. They even had Robert Wolf from the Batman films in Earth 89. That's already been established. So kudos to them. They're amazing. But more than just popping over to another dimension and seeing Michael Keaton in an older version of the character he played in Batman and Batman Returns, they're saying that they might use him for more future DC-centered projects where he may and I'm trying to paraphrase the Hollywood Reporter article, use him in a Nick Fury, Samuel Jackson type of role where he's sort of a mentor or a recruiter or somebody who's pulling the strings behind the scenes. Look, I love me some wacky comic book stuff, but that thing that really throws me there is I'm like, I don't necessarily want to see the Michael Keaton version of Batman be the one that we could get Batman Beyond from. Do you know what I mean? I don't want it to necessarily be built off of the Batman of yesteryear, because that whole world was a different world and tone than what we're used to today. It's not as extreme as Adam West and Burt Ward in the Batman 66 series, but that was even a part of the fun Crisis on Infinite Earths TV crossovers, as they're hopping to different universes and they all have their own different tones. And sure enough, Earth 66 was one of them, where you see Burt Ward and he says like, "Holy red skies of death, Batman." Like that's not going to fit with certain elements of their multiverse. And I just get a little tense, because I'm like, to me, you already have that character, and that really should be Amanda Waller. It serves that Nick Fury type. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, if you're trying to tell a world within the DC universe, there's already a set DC universe, and I want to see that keep going before we bring in the crazy wackadoo multiverse of comic books, which is great, but I really want to see a more, I don't know, more of a focus on what we have versus what we had, because I love that stuff, but I want to go forward and I want to establish that, that universe that they're currently working with. Yeah. Danielle.
Well, and when you reference Spider-Verse, so for me, a lot of what the DC is doing now and what they're doing right now is they're doing multiverse stuff without saying they're multiverse. And they've been saying like, well, we're doing Worlds of DC. It's not necessarily this thing. It's not necessarily that thing. And we've already shown that we're on board with, like, Joker did great. It did gangbusters. Shazam very kind of referenced it, but not so much. We know that the new Batman with our bats is going to be a different thing. And I think that if DC is deciding to lean in a little bit on the idea that, hey, we did this one thing, because they did something that people really love and appreciate. A lot of people really love and appreciate that era of stuff. They like the Justice League. They like Man of Steel. There are a lot of people who like that. And there are a lot of people who that didn't necessarily hit the buttons they wanted to hit. And DC, I think more than any other universe, is primed, except for Spider-Verse, is primed to do this kind of Spider-Versian thing where it's like, okay, well, we got a DC for all of y'all. Y'all like, angry comedian 1970s mustard wearing Joker, we've got that. If you guys want the Joker that wears the grills, we've got that. We can do any of these versions that you want, because we are that is literally what we do with Crisis on Infinite Earths, with everything. And I think that them having Ezra Miller in the CW, which was a huge moment, and I popped so hard for that. It was a huge moment for that, both versions of the series, to say that, like, hey, we have all of these different things. Maybe they'll bring a cartoon version in of the Harley Quinn DC series, which you should be watching. If you are not watching it, it is amazing. Maybe they can bring in different versions of these things and have them say, like, hey, we acknowledge that they all exist and all of these are canons, but they're different canons, and maybe they all come together. Man, I am so into that. It would be nice if they were all established first. I don't necessarily want the R. Pat's Batman to be involved in a big multiverse thing until we get that first movie with him, at least, so we know who he is. But yeah, I'm into the Spider-Versing of the DC verse. It's already what they do and who they are. I'm incredibly, stupidly pumped for it.
Well, you're not alone, because we have some folks in the chat like Graham Ken and Ashelon6023 who really want to see Michael Keaton in a Batman Beyond movie, which something like this could feasibly lead into. I don't know, Ty, what do you think about Michael Keaton reprising his role as Batman?
I mean, I'm kind of along the same lines with Hector, where I think they've already got a lot of moving parts and things that are already going on already. And I'd really like to see them take some time and expand on that first, before you kind of start bringing in some things from left and right and all different directions. So I'm definitely not down with the, I'm going to be a mentor. I'm going to go seek out and find new people to bring into this realm or this atmosphere. So I've got mixed feelings about it, because it's like, Michael Keaton, woo, but also, what are we going to do here? So I think I'm just kind of holding on and waiting to see more details or hear more details about really what the whole thing will entail.
And yeah, I don't necessarily, sorry, just really quickly, I don't necessarily, I think a Nick Fury thing is like not great, but a Peter B. Parker thing could be pretty dope.
It could be.
Okay, I get that. I get
Yeah,
that.
and I mean, we already did see one version of Batman putting the team together in Justice League. So what's to say they don't want to do an Elseworlds take on that? But let's move away from an actor going from Marvel to DC and talk about an actor going from DC to Marvel, specifically J.K. Simmons, the artist formerly known as Commissioner Gordon. In a move that surprised absolutely no one, it was just revealed that not only is J.K. Simmons set to return as the cigar-chomping, mustachioed editor of the Daily Bugle, which is now like InfoWars against Spider-Man, but he's also already filmed his next appearance as J. Jonah Jameson. During an interview on the Jess Cagle show, J.K. Simmons had this to say: "There's one more JJJ appearance in the can, and from what I'm hearing, there's planned for yet another one." So my question to you folks is, what role do you think Triple J will play in Peter's life moving forward? Should he just be like a cameo in this movie, or should he be a major part of a larger story?
He's a cameo kind of character.
Yeah,
I think at this point, if it's not going to be, sorry, Hector, please continue.
No, go ahead.
Well, no, I think if he's not going to be the editor of the Daily Bugle, because a lot of that attention comes from the idea that he is both Spider-Man's boss as a photographer, he's Peter Parker's boss, and he is Spider-Man's like nemesis. And so the idea is, well, Peter has to, get me more shots of Spider-Man, but also and rely on that for getting paid, while also acknowledging that this person like really hates his existence as Spider-Man. And so I really, now that he's revealed, spoilers for a movie that came out, a year and a half ago, now that he has revealed that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, I feel like a lot of the tension in that relationship is gone. And I do think you can still do interesting things with it, but that was the part that kept us hooked, was the idea that he was both this nemesis for Peter Parker, and then also Peter Parker was selling himself out because dude's poor. That was always his shtick. And we've gotten rid of a lot of the poor because now he's with the Avengers, and we've gotten rid of the part that he has to work for J. Jonah Jameson. So I will be interested to see what part he plays in the new.
Yeah, as much as I'd love to see Peter Parker have to make rent by going to these weird alt-right rallies to do men on the street interviews for J. Jonah Jameson, I agree. A lot of that tension is lost there. I think he's best served as having J.K. Simmons pop up to deliver like blustery exposition like they did in Marvel's PS4 Spider-Man game. But yeah, I don't know. It's just,
if a future Spider-Man movie isn't going to focus on, if the whole subplot is not going to be about talking about the ills of right-wing media and the damage it can do to the world, which I'm like, listen, I'd watch that movie if you're actually going to go into it. But if that's not what a big tentpole movie is going to be about, because either we already all are on board, or we don't want to give more attention to the Alex Jones type fringe people that have done real damage, then I agree with what everybody's saying. He's a cameo type character. Ty said it perfectly. And I think that the smartest thing would be it was so smart to introduce him in that tail end of the Spider-Man movie, because now going forward, Marvel Studios can use him for other Marvel properties. He can be commenting on other things. The article was saying that if he's already shot something, it's most likely going to be for like Morbius. And I read that and I went, oh man, what a bummer. That's another thing that's kind of trying to be a part of the MCU, but it's not really. I would be stoked if it was some secret cameo that he shot for like a mid-credits or cameo for Black Widow. Because that movie takes place in 2016, maybe, as far as we know. Maybe there's like a post-credits for Black Widow that brings us up to speed to where the MCU is currently. But it's like, why couldn't you have a J.K. Simmons, J. Jonah Jameson commenting on what's happening in the world around the time with like the fallout of Civil War, boom, 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 boom. J. Jonah Jameson doesn't necessarily have to have been dusted away by Thanos. Like, he could be around for 5 years commenting on stuff. I just think that's the best use of J. Jonah. And that's also how he's used in Marvel Comics. He's not just strictly a Spider-Man supporting character. Like, he is used to populate the rest of that Marvel universe in New York, and how he's commenting on stuff. And that to me would even be more exciting than if they did devote an entire another movie where Peter Parker has to deal with J.K. Simmons. Because it's like, we did see that like 3 times already kind of with Toby. So I think it would be cool to have J.K. talking about Iron Man and Captain America and all these other characters. You're like, yeah, how do you feel about that? I want to know about that.
Exactly. And Jordan Mayer in the chat raised a similar point. He says, or they say, I picture Marvel using him as anti-Avenger propaganda, which I'd much rather see that than see Peter Parker go from sellout to in sellout with this new kind of like alt-right J. Jonah Jameson. But let's talk about something a little bit more confusing than the tangled multiversal webs of the Spider-Verse and superhero comics and superhero movies. Let's talk about Christopher Nolan's upcoming film, Tenet. Now, we know that Tenet is about time. Or is it? We had no idea, though, that Christopher Nolan's obsession with time would bleed into the real world, because it's not a joke to say the biggest mystery about Tenet was whether or not Warner Brothers would push its July 17th release date. But finally, Tenet has been pushed a whopping 2 weeks to July 31st, as opposed to the fall, like Wonder Woman 1984. Now, fans have since turned their attention to the labyrinthine plot trying to unravel its many threads. However, the recent trailer hasn't done much in the way of answering any questions. But thanks to an interview in Entertainment Weekly, we have a description of what the time inversion mentioned in the trailer actually is from Christopher Nolan himself. Tenet deals with time and the different ways in which time can function. Not to get into a physics lesson, but inversion is this idea of material that has had its entropy inverted, so it's running backwards through time relative to us. So you guys get it now, right?
That feels like physics.
Pretty straightforward. We promise it's not a physics lesson. Legally, we can't call it that. But what do you make of his word salad there? Did you enjoy the trailer when you first saw it? Do you like that there's this purposeful ambiguity to his movies and what we've seen about Tenet so far?
I just saw another great comment in the chat. I think that's really funny. Rachel Hine, that's really great. I am always down for watching Christopher Nolan movies in theaters, and I think that the trailers for Tenet have been really. I have to stop myself because I keep wanting to say tenant, like somebody who lives in a. I keep wanting to do that, but that's not what it is. I'm looking forward to seeing this movie, but I don't know if it's going to be one that I'm going to brave a movie theater for. And that doesn't mean that I don't, that I'm not a fan of the guy's work. Of course I am. And he makes movies specifically for theaters and that big experience. And that's really exciting. But I just am like, I feel like nothing's changed when it comes to COVID-19. And I just want to wait a little bit longer at least. As far as the mystery and stuff, yeah, it's par for the course for Christopher Nolan. I'm down for whatever. I'm not going to overthink it. I'm sure it's going to be like Interstellar or Inception, where people can pick it apart and somebody will have kind of solved it and the internet will decide how it feels about it. And then you can just kind of chime in on that conversation if you want to. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that theater discussion in just a moment. And I do have to call out that comment you were talking about that Rachel Hine put in the chat. The main character in Tenet is literally called protagonist. So this brings me to my next question. Why can Christopher Nolan get away with naming the films protagonist? Do you think that his films are pretentious, or is this just him like fooling around with us? Is this just like a weird heist code name he gives somebody?
I think it's just a code name. I mean, because he's working for an organization. The organization's name is Tenet. So I think it's just a code name they're using. But kind of back to the whole thing with time inversion. Here's the way that I saw it. So I don't think it's necessarily like a parallel universe type thing or a parallel world where there are these separate, but, kind of similar things that are happening at the same trajectory. I feel like it's more like a mirror type thing where it's two sides of the same coin. So it's like if you bring up your camera on your computer and you're testing your camera and you move your hand this way, your hand goes the other way. It's the same action, but it depends on what perspective you're looking at it from. So it's not necessarily that things are going forward or backwards or anything. I mean, and I think also with that mirror perspective too, you even look at the name of the movie, it's called Tenet. So it's a palindrome, same forward, same backwards, no matter what side of the title that you're sitting on or whatever. So I think that it's probably more like and I'm not a physics person again, but I think it's kind of like a thermodynamic type thing where you have this constant that's going on and you have these different curves and things that are happening. And so you've got certain things that you're trying to make sure you hit, like different breakpoints that you have to hit to be able to access that mirror world. So you can stop the big event, which is World War III. I'm presuming in this case based on the trailer. So I think that he's got this line. He's trying to break through that line and see how he can get to those certain points so that way he can access through. Because even when you're looking at the trailer and stuff, it seems like things are moving backwards, but I think the whole time he's consistently moving forward. You know what I'm saying? Like And I could be wrong about all of this because, again, it's Christopher Nolan and he does whatever the heck he wants to do. And we pretend like we understand it and we break it down and do all of these fun things to it, right? But I think because, you know, the name of the film and with it being that palindrome, that cyclical type thing, it's all two sides of the same coin, two sides of the same mirror, not a parallel type thing.
Ty, I see that Christopher Nolan is in the chat furiously typing for you to stop spoiling his movie.
Yeah, I love that you're like, well, I don't know a lot of stuff, but thermodynamics. Well, you clearly know more than I do. The only points I know about are flashpoints. I don't know about any of the things that you just said.
When I first watched the trailer, my husband's an engineer. And so that was like one of the small points that he brought up when he was looking at it. He was like, oh, well, there's a thermodynamic chart back there in the background. If you're looking at the scene where he's got on the glove and the, it looks like a screw or something that comes up to his glove or whatever. He was like, wait a minute, pause it and zoom in on the background. And so we started looking at, you know, the whiteboard and some of the stuff back there. So I think that's definitely gonna play into it a whole lot. And I remember, I think it was John David Washington that said that it was kind of like a in-law to Inception. So I'm wondering if it's going to be this whole thing where you've got this seemingly impossible thing happening and then you're just kind of stacking impossible on top of impossible until things collapse.
Mm-hmm. And we even we wrote up on Nerdist. There was we looked at one of the high-res photos that Warner Brothers published of this movie, and if you look closely at John David Washington, there's like a ghost image of him layered over the image of him, so it kind of looks like two different versions of him at different points in time. So I'm loving everything that you're laying out right now, Ty. This all sounds like something that we're eventually going to see come true on the big screen. My other question is, how many other palindromes do you think that he went through before settling on Tenet? Like, where's the script where it's called race car or taco class?
Race car.
Well, it was originally called merry-go-round. So going from merry-go-round going to Tenet now, it still goes back into that same circular type thing.
I figured out the movie. I don't have to go see it now. I
kind of can't wait until you go see it so you can explain it to me, because I am a dumb and you are a smart. So I'm very excited for you to see it explained to me.
I'm so stoked about it, but I'm kind of, again, agreeing with Hector. Like,
yeah,
I can't wait to see it. I love John David as an actor. You know, he was great in Black Klansman. I love him on Ballers and a couple of other things he's been in. So I'm really looking forward to it. But that July 31st date, it ain't working for me.
It feels way too soon. That brings us to our next point, talking about what would it take for you to go back to the theaters and feel safe? I mean, there's been so much back and forth, weirdly, with chains like AMC saying that wearing masks is a political issue because I guess dying from a preventable illness is political for some reason. But what would it take for you to go back to theaters and feel safe while you're there?
Nothing. A vaccine. A vaccine and 6 months. Like, my birthday is in a few months, and I will be having a birthday at home. I honestly, at this point, I can't imagine. And I love the theatrical experience. Trust me, if someone told me right now that I could see Cats 2 and 3 on my birthday in a theater, I'd give it 10 seconds, but then I would be like, not worth it. There is no, even 6 inches, especially now, we're seeing that there's a second wave happening. Like, if you follow the news, there's no way that you can deny that, like, the number of COVID cases is rising in the US. There's no way. We only need to be putting on our masks and staying the F home for at least it would take, New Zealand was like, well, we can open up sports again because we haven't had a case in like weeks. That would be what it takes.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. As we continue to reopen, wearing masks and PPE and taking preventative measures is more important than ever, because otherwise you're going to be stuck back in lockdown again, because we're not even in the second wave yet. We are still part of the first wave, which is just bonkers. Like, I'm dying to get back to the theater. Like, the only thing I would consider would be a drive-in or maybe an outdoor screening where we can enforce being at least 6 feet apart, because I can only control myself and the measures that I take. I cannot control other people, and that's the terrifying part.
I would love to see.
The thing about the mask is I don't see how you're going to actually be able to properly enforce that, because of course you're going to have people that are going to show up and they're going to say, it's my right not to wear a mask because I can do whatever I want to do, and this is not real in my mind, because that's the only place that it's not real, in their mind. But even when you get inside of the theater, once you buy your popcorn, you get all of that stuff. Well, you can't keep a mask on for 2 hours while you're in the theater. You're going to pull the mask down. You're going to be eating and stuff. And so, I mean, are they going to shut concessions down? Even if, like with AMC, who I've been following the most because that's the theater I go to. I have a membership there. I used to go 4 or 5, sometimes 6 times a month. So I was a movie person. 30% capacity. If you're in this big theater, that's still a lot of people that you could potentially be letting in, especially for a new movie like a Tenet or something where people are going to show up and want to go see it.
Yeah, I think that for me, it comes down to as much as I can actually wait to go and do optional social activities, I'm going to try, for as long as we can wait until we do hear about the curve going down or a vaccine or whatever the update on that's going to be. If the question is, well, Hector, let's say that they don't put out movies like Wonder Woman 1984 and Black Widow, which are the two that I'm really the most looking forward to at this point. Those are the most must see for Hector. If they're not going to release those on the same day digitally and they're going to be in theaters for like a couple weeks, a couple months, whatever, and I'm like, I need to go see those movies, I think what it's going to come down to is I am going to need to have as many of those social distancing and masks rules enforced at whatever theater I go to. But at the same time, I'm going to show up and go, I am not getting any concessions. I am not going to try to interact with anybody. Here, scan my phone, get away from me. I have my mask on the entire time. I go and I sit down separated from I'll go Sunday morning at 9 a.m., whatever it takes, to be able to be as far away from people as possible. And then as soon as I see the movie and the movie's done, mask on the whole time, I'm going home and I'm going to take a shower. You know what I mean? Like that's for me, the personal things that I'm going to have to do to just give myself any kind of peace of mind on top of whatever theater chain can enforce.
Yeah, same. I mean, I definitely would try to go during a off-peak time. I definitely would wait. I definitely would go by myself, no concessions, no any of that stuff or whatever. And I mean, with, AMC, presuming they would still let you choose your seat from the app, I would try to choose a seat as far away from anyone else that I possibly can. But I mean, even then, it's still a risk, anytime you go out or you do anything, you're still taking that risk. So, I mean, people just have to use their best judgment and their best, common sense if it's in there and, make the best decision that they can make.
See, the true hack is to fill your mask with candy in advance and then slowly
So then
eat
you
it.
could just tilt your head back and let it go in your mouth.
Yes. That's my pro tip right there. AMC, please don't listen to this. All right, let's move on from this with an actual palate cleanser, which will make more sense in just a moment. We have a couple of weird science stories in the realm of science, technology, and all that fun stuff that we're going to call Weird Science Stories. Now, it seems like everyone these days is getting a new pet, myself included, but if you want a pet with a lot more tech and a lot less dander, well, I'd urge you to consider Boston Dynamics robot dog Spot, which is now on sale to businesses in the US for the low price of $74,500 pre-tax. Now, while Spot is designed for work applications, do you think that humans would ever accept robots over the flesh and blood alternative when it comes to pets?
The only thing I've ever wanted in the world is a robot to fist bump me and then give me a thumbs up, and I blame Terminator 2. It's the only thing I've ever wanted in the world, just like a fist bump and then a thumbs up, even if you're dying. It's the only thing I want, but I don't know, man. I'd have to know the quality. Like, can you snug up on that dog? Is that a snuggable dog, or is that like a dog that's at work? Because I feel really weird if it's like the dog's at work, man, and I don't like. There's too many video games right now that are about like at what point is a AI human or more sentient for me to be like, well, I can't hug up on this dude. He's at work. It's just, is he going to crawl up on my lap and be like, hey, you didn't get this PD, this is done. Like, is he going to like be like, ask me about contracts while he's like snugging my head? I don't know. I
You know, initiate the good boy protocol.
Got it. Well, and then is that okay? Is that consent? I don't know, man.
I mean, I think you hit on the nail on the head there a little bit with talking about sort of like AI. It's really going to come down to, can they program a virtual pet to be such that it replicates the experience of a physical flesh and blood pet to a degree where it's nearly indistinguishable? Because Spot is cool because of its applications as a tool in the workplace, or if you're like a budding cyberpunk villain and trying to like deck out your home lair. But otherwise, it's just like, Like, if you want the robot, just get the robot, but also get a dog instead so it can be scared of something, and then we'll cuddle up on you. See, it's a win-win.
A $75,000 robot that will outlive you just seems wild to me. And I mean, not to be like super like spiritual or anything like that, but I think that, you know, every living being, you know, when we talk about dogs, pets, animals, you have a soul. And I don't think you can replicate that soul and being able to feel that connection that you feel with your pets. You know, I mean,
Ty,
like Danielle said, it's a worker dog. I mean,
do all robot dogs go to heaven? I think that is the question that we want to know.
And that will be answered at the end of Tenet.
Yeah. Ty, does your engineer husband feel differently or exactly the same?
Oh no, he would be totally into having it. Like the price, he's like, no, but also he's thinking about all the things he can make that dog do. So
All right, let's move on for a second, bring things back to that palate cleanser I mentioned earlier, because a researcher at Meiji University in Japan named Home Miyashita has invented a device that mimics flavors when you lick it by using electrical current to blend gels that taste like salt, acid, bitter, sweet, and umami. So we have two questions. The first is why? And the second is, what's the weirdest flavor you'd want to try?
Ooh.
For me, go ahead.
No, please.
I was just going to say, this feels like the first step into those kind of like 1950s visions of the future where you just like press a button and like a little pill comes out and it's like, oh, everything you wanted in a sink, like all your nutrition for the day. We figured
like I can already get Earl Grey hot. What is that fruit that you can only get in like Thailand and other places? Durian. I would like to try durian without it smelling from the comfort of my own home. I feel weird about licking something, but I think durian.
Well, yeah, that's why you get your own personal taste pad and don't share with a friend.
I don't like it.
I saw somewhere in this news story that one of the scientists said something to the effect of like, this is the most groundbreaking addition to television or movies since like color. That this could add so much. And I'm a big fan of 3D movies, and I'm really still like burnt that didn't take off, that nobody hopped on that bandwagon. And I'm going to be so pissed if the thing that people get excited about is taste division. I'm going to be so mad. I'm going to be so mad.
Are you going to lick Rachel's trifle from Friends?
No, I don't want it to have anything to do with that at all.
I don't know if they could do that for like animation, like the pizza from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which always looked like the most delicious thing in the world to me. I could see many applications for this. Or 3D's also like, they're not going to make a comeback until they can let you taste Henry Cavill's abs. Then people are going to flock and pay $90 for those tickets.
Oh boy.
Also in the chat, Michael Boyd says, I smell a new Black Mirror episode. Greg Campbell says he wants to taste a tuna mayo sandwich.
You can do that now.
Just make that. And Smarcy says, friends don't let friends lick their taste pads. Anyway, moving on. Let's shift gears away from technology to something a bit more primal. Now, according to The Hollywood Reporter, the popular 90s book series Animorphs is getting made into a full feature film. Now, if you don't remember Animorphs, then clearly you weren't a 90s kid, or you didn't go to a Scholastic book fair, and you didn't enjoy the majesty that was this book series. I'm looking at you, producer B-Comp. I know it's not your cup of tea, but we're going to talk about it anyway. So K.A. Applegate's 54-book arc follows a group of teens who have the ability to change into any animal they touch as they wage a secret war against a horde of invading alien forces, you know, just like your average American teen. So my first question is, did you read this book series as a kid or an adult? No judgments here. And if you didn't, is there another YA series you'd rather see get the big screen treatment?
I did read Animorphs. I don't think I read every single book in the series, but I definitely remember picking up a few and diving into it. But I think a lot of the memory, I understand, I remember like the basics of it. But I think a lot of things start like mixing with like Goosebumps and all the other weird things I was reading. I do thought it kind of plays into this whole like almost like a body horror type thing because they're able to shapeshift and, they're in this big battle against I believe it was the Yeeks or something like that or whatever. Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely read it. I'm into it. The thing that I really like now, kind of looking back and rethinking about the small things that I can remember is that it really touches on a lot of deep things in the middle of this really like weird and cool type story. I mean, you were talking about war, you had all the coming of age issues and stuff they had. It really played into the whole thing I had as a kid where, I kind of wanted to be like the Power Rangers, where you're living this normal, life during the day, and then, in secret, you're fighting against these magical, or these bigger forces, these alien forces that, no one else knows about. So I'm totally hyped for the film. I don't know where my books are, but
I think you brought up a good
I can
point.
find some and read some of the stuff over again. And I've got kids, so it'd be pretty dope to share it with my kids too.
Yeah, it'd be a great series to revisit with kids, especially when the new movie's going to be coming out. And also, you brought up a good point with body horror, because the Yeerks, the invading alien species, are these parasites that crawl into your ear and take hold of your body using you like a meat puppet. So it is absolutely horrifying when you go back and think about it. Like stuff like this, The Golden Compass, those kind of books that were marketed for kids were pretty horrifying and dealt with some serious issues that, maybe as a child you weren't ready to grapple with, but the longer you think about it, the longer you let them simmer in there, those kids are going through hell.
Right.
I would love for these
and
movies.
That's why I want to go back and read it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love for these movies to keep their bite, because I never read the books, but I learned as an adult that, like Ty was saying, they deal with serious themes. The author had a strong anti-war message in the books, and kids that read the books and read all the way through were traumatized, because like a bunch of the kid characters die by the end of this storyline or whatever, and the author was like, yeah, you should be traumatized. War is bad. And that impact like stayed with those readers all of these years later. So I would love for a movie to be able to do that, be PG-13, so like kids can still kind of go experience it. You don't have to go full R, but I would love for that series to keep some of that bite. And I had a question too, because I never read them. Could the kids morph, but then like morph with their clothes, or would they have to, because the characters on the covers would be morphing into the animals with their clothes on, because you're not gonna have a naked person on a book, but like would they have to do like a weird you know
like
what I mean?
Like Alex Mack scenario?
Yeah, would they have to like, I have to take my clothes off and then turn into an eagle, and then I'm naked somewhere, kind of like Beast Boy, but in the new show Titans, where he has to take his clothes off before he can morph into animal. Was it like that?
See, I don't remember, but in my head canon, and what I'm going to urge the producers of the new movie to do is have the animals wearing tiny, like animal versions of whatever clothes the kids were wearing. So like, or just like a little hawk and a sweatshirt. That'd be pretty cute.
Those movie posters are going to be dope. They better replicate that cool morphing.
I can't wait for like the Mondo series of different artists putting their spin on classic Animorphs book covers. That is going to be fantastic.
Do you think there's value in keeping the Animorphs in the 90s? Like, or do you think they're actually going to try to take it and update it to today's times?
Well, that could be fun, but then it could also mean that it would become an alternate history, because that didn't happen in the 90s, versus if they were to set it today, they could be like, hey kids, this is happening today, secret war with aliens, and we need your help to turn into animals or whatever. So I don't know, I think either would be fun.
Quick, touch this animal before it goes extinct.
Oh.
All right, that might be more of the R-rated version. I'm sorry, folks.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the main topic of the day, DC Comics versus Diamond distribution. I know it sounds like a lot of inside baseball for the comic book industry, but it could have major ramifications for how you purchase comics. So what are the long-term effects this battle could have? What does it mean for Marvel and the smaller publishing houses out there? There's a ton to break down, so let's get into it. Now, obviously, COVID-19 has and continues to have a massive impact on our day-to-day lives. However, one of the biggest businesses in our space that's taken a major beating has been the comic book industry, and by extension, the local comic book shop. Now, for the last few months, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced the main comic book distributor Diamond to stop shipping comics, which effectively shuttered many local shops. Now, for those of you who aren't in the know, Diamond has had basically a monopoly on comic book distribution. Essentially, they're the middleman between the comic book publishers like Marvel, Image, and DC, and the local comic book stores. And they were basically the only game in town until now. Because in a move that shocked everyone, DC Comics, commonly referred to as one of the big two alongside Marvel among publishers, revealed they're going to be ditching Diamond altogether and using alternative means of distribution. And while there's been some reconciliation recently, it's still unclear exactly why DC left Diamond after 25 years of working together, but many industry insiders suspect they're declaring war on Marvel. Now, even without the COVID crisis, it's been a rough couple of years for Diamond. The theory is that losing DC Comics which is effectively a third of its business, that could be the final nail in its coffin that bankrupts Diamond and puts it out of business. And without Diamond, Marvel would have no way to distribute their books. So with that in mind, why do you think that DC decided now's the time to break away from Diamond's stranglehold over the industry?
I have a lot. I'm sorry. I have a lot of opinions on this story in particular. For one thing, to put it into context for 90s kids, DC breaking away with Diamond is essentially like when bands were starting to break away from Ticketmaster and saying that like this is the big thing. We don't like how much they're taking from consumers, how much whatever. And granted, we don't know what DC is going to do and if it's going to be like another thing. But to me, that's a lot of what it feels like was when publishers and people started getting away from Ticketmaster and moving to brown paper tickets and other ticketing places. Another thing I think is important is that it is not just COVID-19. This has been 10 years in the making. Between back when bookstores, you remember bookstores? Back when bookstores were doing a lot of, when graphic, well, 20 years, when graphic novels started rising into prominence, it used to be you could get graphic novels, but it would be very much like, here's a storyline you want to catch up on, you can't find the single issues, here it is. And then it became, every single thing became graphic novels, and they became available in your Borders, your Barnes and Nobles, like all of these other bookstores. And so then that became hard, and people weren't buying as many single issues. So this is not, COVID is one of those things where it's like it might be rushing along what's happening. It is not the cause. This has been happening since the advent of graphic novels. And then when bookstores started dying and people started doing more stuff on Amazon, right at that point was when streaming or the ability to be able to get titles you love online, whether you are subscribe to Marvel's thing or comics, there's a lot of different ways that you can get your comics online and be able to read them that way. And even before that, much like with MP3s, people were just stealing their comics, and there were apps where you could read your comics on your phone that you were just jacking. So this is not a new thing. And there are some people who are still very loyal to their local comic book shop, and I think that's dope. But this model has been in flux for 20 years. The fact that this is happening now is not only not surprising, it's surprising that it took this long, and it's surprising that it took COVID for it to get here. People who are loyalists have been keeping comic book shops in, like, they have been keeping them in business for 10 years, just through being loyal and through being advocates for that. This business should have died a decade ago.
It was
I'm
really
not saying it's
scary.
right, like I'm
Right.
saying agree, but I'm saying like monetarily, I'm surprised this didn't
It
happen a decade ago.
it was
Yeah, and you're
really
talking about the specific business. You know, of
Right.
course,
Mhm.
comics will never die. I mean, it'll always
Yes.
be there, and
Yeah.
it's always changing and changing forms and stuff. My whole take on it, and the way that I was kind of processing through everything, is kind of how it affects them as far as distribution chains. You
Mhm.
know, so I mean, if they've got different shipments coming in multiple times, you know, then they're having to pull. You got most comic shops that don't have, they have 10 or less employees there. A lot of them are family owned. So you've got these multiple shipments coming in. They're trying to handle those things. Now you're going to have, you know, comic book Tuesday and comic book Wednesday and comic book Thursday. So I mean, how are they going to manage all of that? You know?
I don't think we've talked about Comic Book Tuesday. Would you, Ty? You seem to have a really good handle on it. Would you be able to explain to people what Comic Book Tuesday is?
So
And
with comic, so what's going to happen now is, since DC is actually going to be, you know, of course, going through a different distribution channel, they're actually going to be distributing their comics out on Comic Book Tuesday. That's the only like real difference that the average comic reader, somebody who's not, unless you're just invested in the business of what's going on behind it,
Mhm.
that's going to be the day that those comics are going to be expected to come out. Which, I mean, it seems like a small change, but when you've attached yourself to this Comic Book Wednesday, and when people have staffed around Comic Book Wednesdays, like my local comic shop, they're closed on Tuesdays, so that way they can prep for, you know, Comic
Yeah.
Wednesday or whatever. And so
Yeah.
now they're looking at possibly having to reshift their hours and focus and everything. um, a lot of the comic shops, especially here where I'm at, a lot of them have just transcended past focusing on comics. So they're doing like D&D nights. They're bringing in the couches, and they're
Mhm.
encouraging people to hang out and almost setting up like a
Funko
coffee shop
Pops.
type environment to really
Funko Pops.
not only, you know, hang on to those loyalists and stuff, but still trying to
Yeah.
just get those people that are a little bit newer in. I think they're just realizing that the way that we engage with comics is changing. So they're trying to see
Yeah.
how they can hold on through that change. And I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how everything plays out from this point forward.
Yeah, I definitely think that local comic book stores are going to bear the brunt of the sort of casualties in this battle between DC and Diamond, because even if it is a so-called war on Marvel Comics trying to leave Marvel like without any way to distribute its comics, Marvel will be fine. They are backed by
Mhm.
Disney. They have more money than God. They will be okay. Who's going to suffer are these smaller publishing houses, independent comic producers, and then
Mhm.
all of these local mom and pop stores who just
Yeah.
won't be able to like deal with it, especially as we move away from single issue purchases. Like if they don't have a digital storefront, if they don't have a way to do that, if they don't have like the most up to date trade paperbacks, they're just going to be screwed. And it's like you said, Danielle, it is shocking that this reckoning has not come sooner, but it's just so deeply disheartening to see this happen to the industry.
And now there's this thing where there's all of these covers that are going to be like a backlash to this, where it's like comics happen on Wednesday. And it's like, we don't, I don't care about the war between you two huge companies with a lot of
Right.
money. I want to read the things I love. I want the creators that I love to still have jobs. I want the characters that I still love to be readable. I am not, some people are very invested in this idea that like it's this versus that. They all have more money than I will ever have. I'm not invested in this company
Mhm.
versus that company. I want the people and the creators that I love to be able to make the things that they love. I want the books, and especially like there's always going to be a Superman, man, there's always going to be an Iron Man, there's always going to be an Avengers, there's always going to be a Justice League.
Yeah.
But like there are also little smaller imprints in that. God, we saw what happened to Vertigo. Like I want these things that are smaller to be able to have a life. And I
Mhm.
don't care about like two big giants. I mean, yeah, Amalgam was fun, but not in real life, man.
And whenever you encounter people who root for one of those tribes to like defeat the other, if one of those companies were to stop making comics, if DC were to shut down or if Marvel were to shut down, that does not mean that the other one would win and everything would be okay. That would be so bad for the comic book industry as a whole.
Yep.
If DC were to close doors and stop doing comics, Marvel's Marvel would be that would be horrific. We need to have a healthy competition between the two so that we as consumers can continue to get that art form pushed further, because that's what they're trying to do. Once one becomes the only game in town, that's not good for the art form at all. And doing research on this storyline is very, very interesting. Something similar did happen in the 1990s. But I think that the thing that's really interesting too is I think IGN had a great breakdown of everything, and they were talking to different people involved at the mom and pop level, at the distribution level, and at the end of that reporting, they came to the conclusion of like it's kind of too early to tell what this is going to do in the long term, how this is going to change the industry in the long term for a bunch of different factors. So I think all comic book fans are kind of, whether you're a single issue person or whether you're a trade waiter, we're all just kind of waiting to be like, what does this mean? Is Marvel going to then move away from Diamond? Is Disney going to have to step in and be like, okay, now we have our own distribution thing, or is Disney going to keep doing what they've been doing, where like they've had other comic book companies publish Marvel comics themselves, like other like companies like IDW and Dark Horse have done Marvel
Yep.
characters. So
Mhm.
it's been a really weird and interesting thing that's been happening behind the scenes and stuff. So yeah, but like Ty and Danielle were saying, like these characters will endure and these stories there'll always be some version of the art form of comics. But in terms of maybe there being a weekly, monthly issue of a story that you can go to a comic book shop and get it every week on Wednesday or Tuesday or whatever, like I don't know.
I'm sorry. I'm going to say one last thing. It's going to be very quick because I'm really passionate about this. Batman the Animated Series was a thing that was based on years and years of Batman comics. That brought people into watching, a lot of people into watching comic book TV shows. The next thing, X-Men comics brought a lot of people into watching X-Men stuff. Both of these brought people into reading comics, which brought them into comic book shops week after week, where they discovered other titles, where they discovered, later you would discover a Powers, you would discover a Scott Pilgrim. And if we no longer have these two biggies around as a entry point or as a gateway drug to other comics, it is bad for the entire industry. I don't like this. It's bad. It's bad for the,
Exactly.
and it's not that it's bad because Diamond, whatever, cut out the middleman, whatever. The idea, like this is the head to head. It's bad for the industry. I hate it.
Yeah, I think you summed it up pretty accurately there. I just want to end on a positive note. What would you say is a good way that we can support our local comic book stores during this time?
If they have gift certificates right now, buy them. If any place has a gift certificate or a gift card that you can buy, if they are still doing, because some places are still doing boxes where they're like, hey, we'll still do your boxes. And then like maybe, because some places are like, we'll only open for people who have boxes and that'll be the people, and we'll have it set up, or like curbside or like all of these other places, we will have that ready for you. If those are things that you are capable of doing, especially buying gift certificates, that is one of the best ways that you can support right now, I think.
Yeah,
Awesome.
definitely gift certificates. Doing that, making sure you're showing up if they're doing any kind of curbside events or anything like that. As things start to slowly open back up, even if you're not necessarily comfortable with going yourself, making sure that they're getting that promotion through your, your social media feeds and stuff, letting people know what's going on at the shops. Continuing to order through them like you normally do. I mean, of course, you have other channels that you can go with, but definitely continuing your normal ordering cycle, even with what's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So folks, you heard it. Get out there, support your local comic book shops if you can. And if you can't do so monetarily right now, just give them a signal boost on your social media, because even word of mouth helps. It might get to someone else who might not know. Every little bit helps. Now, let's move on with the news out of the way. It's time for something a little bit more lighthearted. I'm talking about Nerdist News Trivia. Here at Nerdist, we like to connect our trivia to the barest of threads. So with today being June 22nd, we thought we'd use today's trivia segment to look back 19 years ago when a little film about street racing and the high-stakes world of stealing DVD players from a moving truck hit the big screen would go on to spawn one of the biggest movie franchises of all time, The Fast and the Furious. So this is going to be a multiple choice style trivia segment. Let's start things off with a bit of an easy one, shall we? Okay, Vin Diesel's character, Dominic Toretto. He loves three things in life: cars, family, and of course, beer. Which beer is his favorite? A, Coors, B, Bud Light with lime, C, Corona, or D, PBR?
I should have wrote it out. It's a B. Was it B, Corona? Or was
No,
it
C is Corona.
I was trying to put Corona.
I will give you all credit because you said it. I know the people in the chat might be bigger sticklers, but you all got that one correct. So my pen just broke on me. So there we go. Folks, this is why I use analog. I have ink on my fingers right now. This is truly a nightmare made flesh. All right. Let me just, if one of my producers can keep track of the of these scores, I'm covered in ink right now. This is bad. All right. Laundry after this. Moving on. Number 2. Many rappers have lended their acting chops to the Fast and Furious franchise over the years, but which of the following rappers has not appeared in any of these films? A, Ja Rule, B, Ludacris, C, Iggy, or D, 50 Cent? All right, you all answered D, 50 Cent. That is correct. Yes. Curtis has not made his way to the big screen on this series just yet, but who knows?
Well, now that he's heard that Ja Rule has through you, he definitely will buy the entire series.
Exactly. Ja Rule.
Monica.
I want him to play Ja Rule in a Firefest documentary. Let's move on to number 3. Dominic Toretto's 1970 Dodge Charger that was featured in the first Fast and Furious movie made a cameo in which other racing movie? A, Herbie Fully Loaded, B, Speed Racer, C, Cars, or D, Death Race?
I have no idea.
No idea, but I'm going to go with D as a guess.
Okay, everyone voted D for Death Race. Unfortunately, that is wrong. The answer is A, Herbie Fully Loaded. And many fans now consider Herbie and Fast and the Furious to be in the same universe.
Did not know that. Obviously.
Unbelievable.
Look, it's actually quite believable. They lay the groundwork. You never check Herbie's trunk. It's full of those DVD players. All right, number 4. True or false? Michelle Rodriguez and Jordana Brewster did not have their driver's license when they were first cast in The Fast and Furious. True or false?
False. Only one of them didn't have their driver's license, but the other one did?
Neither of them had their driver's license. The answer is true. Danielle, you get the point there.
Look, it's very easy for grown-ass women to never have a driver's license. It happens.
Go. I should have known. I just watched all the special features on the first The Fast and the Furious movie, and I remember Jordana Brewster talking about not getting her license or having to get it for the movie. I should have also known that Michelle Rodriguez was in the same boat. Wow, disappointed in myself.
I'm sorry to trip you up on semantics, Hector. All right, number 5 is a fill in the blank. So there's going to be 2 things to fill in. You can just do a number if you need to. Fill in the blank. Even though Tokyo Drift is the 3rd release in the franchise, chronologically, which 2 movies does this fall between?
Not false.
Okay, Danielle says 5 and 6. Okay, I'm sorry. The answer, Ty and Hector, is correct. 6 and 7. It falls between Fast and Furious 6 and Furious 7. But if you're a fan of Fast 5, you're going to enjoy this next question. So multiple choice, Dwayne Johnson's role as Luke Hobbs was originally written for which actor? A, Will Smith, B, Idris Elba, C, Steven Seagal, or D, Tommy Lee Jones?
Oh, man.
Okay. All right. So, Ty, Danielle, you said C. Unfortunately, Hector is correct. The answer is D, Tommy Lee Jones. According to Vin Diesel in an interview, or maybe it was his Facebook live stream that he used to do, Dwayne Johnson was cast after a fan suggested when he asked who they'd like to see him work with. But to be honest, I'd also love to see Tommy Lee Jones with just like 300 pounds of pure muscle. That would be a cinematic.
That is why they would have wanted to cast him and not Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about a punch count when you have Tommy Lee Jones.
He throws all the punches. Okay, number 7. I'm glad you all have these whiteboards because this is a draw-off. Now, the Fast and the Furious franchise is all about awesome cars that most people can only dream about driving one day. So I'm going to give you all 30 seconds to draw your dream car. Whoever has the most creative car wins the point.
I can't draw, so
Same.
there we go. And my pen's going out.
I wonder if Hector has a background in illustration at all. But keep in mind, it's subjective. I am the judge here.
Okay, I think I've done as good as I can do. Heck, this is going to be amazing.
It's just a sketch.
And much like Christopher Nolan, I have no concept of time. So whenever you're done, just let me know.
All right. I think I am done.
Danielle, let's start with yours.
So I did the closest approximation of the Homer. It's not it, but it's the closest. It's the closest I could do without reference.
Oh my God! It's got like the fishtail and everything.
Here's the thing about the Homers: you have to have the second pod.
Oh my God!
The kids in the back seat, Danielle. You forgot about that. There's you got to keep the kids separate from the rest of the parents.
Oh, heck
so there's I think there was a satellite dish. I don't know. It's green. That is also the Homer. So don't give Danielle and I a point for that.
He's obviously the better Homer. Yeah, Ty's got to be way more imaginative than we were.
No, I can't draw, and I didn't really think of like a pop culture car or anything like that. I just want a Porsche Cayenne, and I literally wrote right here, I can't draw, yo, but there it is, and I wrote the name right there because that's what I want.
Well, because I said the most creative, and yours is the most unique, you get the point, Ty.
Checks out.
This is This is just how art works. Welcome to the high stakes world of art galleries. All right, let's move on a little bit. True or false? The original title for this movie was Point Break Streets.
Dan.
False.
That's a big old false.
That is correct. It is false. And bonus point if any of you can tell me the original title.
Should be, I think, Road Wars.
Close. Starts with an R.
Race Wars. Why did I say
No.
no?
Red Line.
Red Line.
Also the name of a fantastic anime movie, which I urge you all to check out. One of the best racing movies I've ever seen. Just wild.
If this movie was called Race Wars, would anyone have?
I can't wait to see Race Wars 9.
That sounds like something a white studio executive.
Though, like Race Wars. Yeah.
Yeah. That is a white studio executive being like, yeah, there's no problem.
I don't see any issue with this.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with calling? They're racing, right?
They're racing, and it's a war.
Let's drift away from that one. Number 9, multiple choice. Vin Diesel only agreed to do a cameo in Tokyo Drift so he could get the rights to do what other movie with his production company? A, Bloodshot, B, Riddick, C, Triple X, Return of Xander Cage, or D, The Last Witch Hunter?
B, Riddick.
The answer is B, Riddick. That is correct. And I will say The Last Witch Hunter, if you want to see something cool for that, little shameless self-promotion, you can see Vin Diesel playing Dungeons and Dragons with us right here on this channel or the full version on Geek and Sundry's YouTube. We brought him in. That movie, his main character, Calder, was his old D&D character, literally has the name tattooed on his body. And then we put his money where his mouth is, got to play D&D with him. Great time was had by all. Anyway, moving on. All right, number 10, true or false, Han's full name in The Fast and the Furious is Han Solo. True or false?
I was writing it down even before you finished, Dan. I knew you were going to ask. That's a true.
The answer is true. The answer is all right.
I love it.
I had a tiebreaker question, but it turns out we don't need it because the answer is for who the winner of this trivia contest, drumroll please, is Hector with 7 points. Hector, congratulations.
Yeah, it is Hector.
Literally,
Furious
everyone
7.
said there's no way Hector can get at least 7 points on this quiz, but you proved everybody wrong.
And I told every single person, you embarrass me. That's what I told them, all of them.
Everybody
That's
said
the
this
line
guy's
from the
sandwich
first film.
crazy.
Yeah.
So, folks, thank you.
And I said, this is where my jurisdiction begins. That's when I started.
Anyway, thank you so much for
All
playing,
right.
everybody. I really appreciate it. And now is the time for our 30-second soapbox. This is the time you can get whatever's on your chest off your chest, promote whatever you want to promote, talk about whatever you feel like. Hector, as the newly crowned winner of our Fast and Furious trivia series, you get to go first. So what have you got?
I had an unfair advantage. I love that dumb movie series, and I'm going to plug. I also happen to be doing a podcast about these movies right now, currently. So if you are interested in these movies, listen to myself and my roommate, normally on our movie podcast called the 500 Greatest Films Podcast. We have a guest over, but we've not been doing that because quarantine. So he and I and our other roommate, his fiance, Chelsea, have been watching each of the Fast and Furious movies. She's never seen them. That's part of the podcast as we talk about them. We talk about if they're pro-cop, anti-cop, how we feel about them now, how the series evolves. So check it out. It's the 500 Greatest Films Podcast. Thanks.
Fantastic. And that's such a treat to get to see these movies for the first time. Wow. I'm very jealous. I'm going to check those episodes out.
Chelsea, we just watched the 4th one, and Chelsea was like, Letty's alive, right? And we're like,
no spoilers. Awesome. Ty, now is your time on the soapbox. Is there anything you'd like to talk about?
Okay. So I'm a podcast person, and right now I've been going back through and just re-listening to some of my favorite ones. And one of the podcasts that I really, really love right now is Ear Hustle Podcast. It's actually a podcast where incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people in San Quentin talk about their different experiences that they go through. An episode that I listened to recently, they just wrapped up season 5. So, if someone wants to go back and listen, they can listen to all of those. But there was an episode, I think in season 3, and it just really thrilled me because they had a guy on talking about how they play D&D while locked up. And how they carry their cards around and how they just get right into the game the minute that they see each other, and the escapism and the joy and the wonder and stuff that they get from that was just so interesting and enriching to me. But it's a really great podcast because you get a chance to if you have any questions about what happens inside of the prison complex or what it's like to be there, and a lot of the preconceived notions and stuff that we have about it, you really get to see it from a completely different perspective. It will change the way you think about things. It will change the way that you envision things. It's funny, it's passionate, it's impactful, it's real, it's raw. I mean, it's just a really, really great podcast. So I think everyone should check it out.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the recommendation. All right. Last but not least, Danielle, what have you got for us?
Okay, really quick. So I have two going off of what Ty said, because these are two that I really like. Serial season 3 is all about like when people are in the court system and how the court system can either help them or fail them. There is also Running from Cops, which I really recommend because it's about how court shows like Cops and other shows are not super helpful for the community and actually like twist things around, and they're not great. They're worth listening to. If you want to support a thing that I do, I will do a last minute plug for me. If you like panel nerdy debatey things, I'm doing one for we said sci-fi called The Great Debate. Go check that out. But honestly, mostly go check out Running from Cops and go check out Serial season 3. They are very illuminating and very interesting about the law enforcement system, and I think everyone should listen to them. Okay, bye.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you all so much for being here. Ty, Hector, Danielle, I really appreciate you guys taking the time. As always, you guys are so funny, insightful, hilarious. And I always just treasure when I get to talk to you. So this is a real treat for me. And oh my God, is that... is that what's going to happen when Michael Keaton comes on the big screen? He's going to say that, then just leave immediately?
Love it.
Yep.
Incredible. See, that is... Folks, we love a good sight gag here on Nerdist News Talks Back. That's it for today's show. Thank you again to everyone who joined us on the panel, and thank you everyone who joined us at home. Without you, we couldn't do this, and we really appreciate you tuning in. And with that, be sure to check out tomorrow's episode of Nerdist News, because we're going to break down Mark Hamill's secret Star Wars roles. That's right, Luke Skywalker was just the tip of the iceberg. We'll see you all next Monday for a brand new episode of Nerdist News Talks Back at 2 p.m. live on Nerdist and Geek and Sundry's YouTube, as well as Geek and Sundry's Twitch. Thank you so much, and until then, bye-bye.